Hello everyone, I'm so glad you're here. Tonight, I'm here to help you unwind, slow down, and let your thoughts drift gently into sleep. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, and I'm honored to be part of that quiet moment in your evening. So before we begin, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. Now, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let's begin. Story 1. The Woman Who Wouldn't Let Go. This is a story about my dad's ex-girlfriend, my father. As charming and kind-hearted as he is, has always had the worst luck with women. It's almost as if he's a magnet for chaos. Every woman he's ever dated, except for the one he's with now, has been a storm of emotional turbulence. Mentally and physically abusive partners, toxic manipulation, and narcissistic outbursts. It's like a gallery of bad romances. And yet, among all of them, none managed to stain our lives as deeply as Mary did. Mary wasn't just a bad relationship. She became a shadow that followed us all, long after her place in his life had ended. They met at a Christmas party. She stood by the punch bowl with a glass in her hand and a smile that seemed sweet, innocent even. My dad had just clawed his way out of another 3-year-long on and off relationship with a textbook narcissist. He was worn down but open, still foolishly hopeful that love might be simple again. Mary claimed she was also fresh out of an abusive relationship, and they bonded over that shared pain. He believed her. For a while, so did I. They started dating. It seemed good at first. Quiet dinners, weekend walks, texts that didn't feel suffocating. But there was something odd about how Mary kept avoiding invitations to his place and never allowed him over to hers. At first, he brushed it off. Maybe she was just private. Maybe she was healing. But then, a phone call. A man claiming to be Mary's husband asking how my dad knew her. My dad assumed it was a controlling ex, not uncommon in his world. He confronted Mary and she fed him a story. Her ex wouldn't sign the divorce papers, she said. They were separated, she insisted. But things didn't add up. Her explanations didn't match her actions. Her story started fraying at the edges. Eventually my dad started investigating. He called her parents. He spoke to people she worked with. The truth came unraveled, ugly and tangled. Mary was still married. Worse, she wasn't separated at all. As far as her family and friends knew, she was happily married, and my father was either a side secret or didn't exist at all in their narrative. When he confronted her with this, he expected anger, maybe denial, but what he got was obsession. She didn't let go. She couldn't. She unraveled. It started with phone calls, dozens of them at all hours. She'd text him 50, sometimes 70 times a day. He moved twice, changed his number, but like water leaking through the cracks, she found a way back in. She'd leave love letters at his job, call from unknown numbers, promise to visit. She became a persistent ripple in his life, one that refused to fade. And then she found me. I remember the first text she sent me. It was polite, warm even. She referred to herself as Grandma Mary and congratulated me on the birth of my daughter. The message ended with a request for pictures. My stomach sank. I didn't reply. A week later, a package arrived. Baby clothes, toys, books, all addressed to my daughter from Mary. I returned the packages at first. Then I started donating them unopened. After a while, the tone of her texts changed. She wasn't just trying to be sweet, she was insistent, demanding updates, asking why I was ignoring her, warning me not to turn her away from her granddaughter. I never replied, not once. But the messages kept coming. Then came the knock at the door. It was just after 1 a.m. My husband was working a night shift and I was home alone. Thankfully, our daughter was spending the night at my aunt and uncle's house. I peered through the peephole and felt my heart drop. It was her. She was holding something wrapped in plastic, banana bread, I'd later find out. I didn't open the door. I stood quietly, breath held, waiting until she left. She placed the bread on my doorstep and walked back into the night. I threw it away the second my husband got home. The next night she came again. This time she knocked longer, harder, and when I didn't answer, she began to text me again. Her messages started out sweet, then morphed into demands. She said she wanted to see her grandbaby and have some girl time. When I still didn't answer, she grew more aggressive. She pounded on the door. She screamed through the wood. That's when I called the police. While I was on the phone with dispatch, our neighbor stepped out. His wife had already called the cops too. He told Mary the police were on their way. She ran, disappeared into the park across the street. They didn't catch her that night. My dad finally secured a restraining order. It was granted without much resistance, and for a while the silence felt like peace. We moved across the state, but even there she found a way to creep back in. Now and then a message will still arrive, always from a new number, sometimes just one word, hi. Other times, long paragraphs about how she misses us all and still loves my dad. I never reply, but I save every message, every single one, just in case I ever need to file my own restraining order. It's a strange kind of haunting when someone is obsessed with your life, your family, your child. Mary didn't wear a mask. She didn't lurk in shadows, but she was still a presence. A spectre in daylight. A reminder that some ghosts are still alive and breathing and watching you from just outside the window. Story 2. The night Derek showed up. 3 years ago I tried Tinder for the first time. I was 25, and though most people my age had already cycled through their fair share of dating apps, I hadn't been single since I was 17. I met my ex in high school. We fell in love quickly, married a few years later, and had a baby together. For a while, I thought I had everything I wanted, but as the years passed, the relationship soured. The resentment between us festered until even the sound of his footsteps in the hall would make my skin crawl. I tried to hold it together for the sake of our child, but the abuse became unbearable. One night, I left, carrying our baby through the dark in silence, never looking back. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild. I found a new place to live, started a new job, and slowly began to remember who I was before everything fell apart. My weekends were spent alone, adjusting to shared custody and trying to rediscover what it meant to just be me. That loneliness, though, cut deep, not in a desperate way, but in a quiet, aching sort of way. I wasn't ready to fall in love again, but I did want to feel something. I wanted to feel desired, seen, so I downloaded Tinder. Not to find the one, but to find a reminder that I was still alive in my own body. That's when I matched with Derek. He wasn't particularly handsome, but he was warm and disarming in a way that made me feel safe. We shared a love for hiking, craft beer and cheesy karaoke nights. He had a slightly awkward sense of humor that made me smile when I didn't want to. When he asked me to dinner, I agreed. My first real date in 8 years. I put on my best dress, tried to ignore the nerves bubbling in my chest, and met him at a cozy restaurant downtown. The beginning was clumsy. We fumbled through small talk, unsure of ourselves, but once the drinks started flowing, the conversation eased. We laughed about his hatred for karaoke and my undying love for it. Before long, I convinced him to follow me to a local dive bar where I often went to sing my heart out. We sang into the night, took shots, flirted clumsily, and ended the night making out in his truck. Both of us tangled in the thrill of something new and reckless. It felt good. It felt like a breath of fresh air after years of drowning. We kept texting after that, not obsessively, but enough to keep a spark going. He wasn't clingy, and I didn't feel any intense emotional pull toward him, which was actually a relief. I didn't want complicated, I just wanted fun. When we planned our second date, he suggested tubing down the river that ran through our town. It sounded perfect. We drove up in my truck, left his parked at the end of the river, and he offered to keep both our keys zipped in his swim shorts so they wouldn't get lost. It seemed like a logical plan, until it wasn't. After a long sun-drenched float through the river, we reached the end and began packing up. That's when his face shifted. He reached into his pocket, paused and said, "Your key is gone." I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but his face told me otherwise. Panic set in. That key was my only copy. The river was long and winding. We'd stopped multiple times to swim and drift. Finding the key seemed hopeless, but we decided to try the next day. The following afternoon, we searched the riverbank, stopping at every spot we had swum or rested at. It was exhausting. We were losing hope. But then, just as the sunlight began to fade into soft gold, Derek spotted something glinting in the shallows. My key! I nearly cried. We hugged, relieved, laughing in disbelief. To celebrate, we headed back to his place for drinks. His home was a trailer, tucked away behind a wooded driveway. He told me he rented a room there, and the elderly couple who owned it were away. Inside, the place was messy. Not just a little unkempt, but the kind of mess that covers every counter and clutters every floor. His bedroom was no better. A mattress on the floor, scattered laundry, and a plastic bin filled with chips and cheap beer. Still, we slept together again. But something had changed. The lightness from our first night together was gone. I felt heavy, disconnected. I knew, as I lay beside him in that musty room, that this would be the last time I saw him. We stopped texting much after that. I started to move on. I had plans that weekend to meet some friends for karaoke, the thing that always lifted my spirits. That afternoon I got a message from Derek. He asked if I was going to karaoke that night. I told him yes. He said he'd be there too, with a co-worker. Didn't want it to be awkward, he said. I appreciated the courtesy. I didn't think too much of it. Later that night, my friends and I settled into our usual booth at the bar, drinks in hand, laughter filling the space around us. Then I noticed him, Derek, sitting a few booths over with a woman. He waved at me, grinning, a little too enthusiastically. His date turned to see who he was waving at. I returned the gesture with a polite nod, hoping to avoid any weirdness, but it didn't stop there. Hours passed. Then he and his date stumbled over to our table. He introduced her, Kate, and plopped down beside me, pulling her close. They were clearly drunk. Kate, sweet but sloppy, told stories through slurred words. We smiled, tried to be polite, but under the table I felt Derek's hand slide onto my thigh. I froze. His date was right there, unaware. I carefully removed his hand and excused myself, walking to the bar with my heart racing. When I turned around, he was still watching me. Eventually Kate left. Derek stayed. He slumped at our table, eyes glazed, trying to start conversations that quickly unraveled into drunken nonsense. He leaned into me, whispered that he liked my laugh, told me I was cute. I felt trapped. My friends could sense my discomfort. We hatched a plan. The girls and I would excuse ourselves to the bathroom, then slip out the back. Our male friend would distract him if needed. As we stood to leave, Derek followed. "Where are we going next?" he asked. My friend told him the night was over. Derek pouted, insisted he'd walk us home. We declined. He was too drunk to drive. We offered to call him a cab. He refused. Said he'd sleep in his truck. That seemed safe enough. At least it did at the time. We slipped out the back door, hurried down the path. A few minutes later my phone rang. Derek. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Then another. His voice, once light and playful, was now heavy, dark. "I don't understand," he said. "I love you." His words slurred, thick with liquor and something else, something darker. Then the final message came. "I'm really starting to hate you." Back at home I sat in the dark, lights off, heart pounding. I thought the night was over. I thought I was safe, but then headlights swept across my window. My stomach dropped. It was Derek's orange truck. Parked outside, just sitting there. He wasn't moving, just staring. I crouched low, hiding. My phone lit up. Another voicemail. In a sing-song voice, he whispered, "Where are you?" I called the police. They arrived quickly. He failed the breathalyzer. They arrested him and towed his truck. One officer told me kindly but honestly that there wasn't much they could do beyond the DUI charge unless he made a direct threat. He'd be out by morning. "Keep your doors locked," he said. Derek texted me the next afternoon. Apologized, said he was in a bad place. I told him never to contact me again, and he didn't. But for months, I saw him from time to time, biking to work. He'd lost his license. Eventually, he moved away. The sightings stopped, but I still remember the way he stared through my window. the way his voice changed in that final message. There's a specific kind of fear that doesn't need screaming or violence. It just needs someone who doesn't know when to let go. So Derek, if you're out there somewhere, let's never meet again. Story 3. The Catfish and the Threat. When I was 17, I thought I had found love, or at least something like it. I was awkward back then, painfully shy, self-conscious to a fault, and desperate to feel attractive in a world that had never really shown me that I was. I'd always been the quiet girl, the one who faded into the background of the classroom, the one who went unnoticed at parties. At school, I didn't have many friends, and I certainly didn't have any admirers. But then came Brandon, and Brandon noticed me. He was beautiful in the way that made your stomach flip. Blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a toned, athletic frame that made it impossible not to stare. He played soccer for his university and was, in every way, the kind of guy I had convinced myself I'd never have a chance with. We met on a dating app, a lesser-known one, older than Tinder. He said he was 19, just 2 years older than me, and he lived 7 hours away from my city. Far, but not impossible. I didn't question it. Why would I? When you've never felt seen, you don't question the attention when it finally arrives. You soak in it. At first, our chats were sweet, casual. He asked about my life, about my interests, and complimented me in ways I wasn't used to. Every message from him made my heart race. Every time his name lit up on my phone, I smiled. It felt real, and more than that, it felt like maybe I was finally someone worth wanting. But the conversation slowly shifted. He started asking for pictures, not selfies, not the kind you post on social media. These were private. He wanted to see me in my bra. He never outright asked for nudes, maybe because he knew how young I was, maybe because he didn't want to scare me off, but the intent was always there, hanging in the space between his words. I was nervous, embarrassed, but I wanted to please him. I wanted him to keep liking me, and in my naive teenage mind, that meant giving him what he asked for. So I did. I never sent anything fully naked. I was too insecure for that, but I did send pictures of myself in my underwear, and he praised me for it, told me I was beautiful, sexy, irresistible. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, it was grooming. He had power over me because he made me feel like I had value. And when that's the only currency you think you have, you'll give it all away to keep the affection coming. I didn't understand the danger I was in. Not yet. As time went on, I began to crave more than just messages and pictures. I wanted to see him, meet him, talk to him on video. Every time I brought it up, though, he had an excuse. His webcam was broken, his phone camera wasn't working, he was at the gym, or with friends. The list went on. And when I pushed harder, he promised that he'd come visit me for my birthday. I clung to that promise. I even told my best friend about it. She was an exchange student from Germany. Honest, blunt, and refreshingly direct. When I showed her his pictures, she frowned. "Have you ever seen him on video?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "Something's wrong," she said. "He's too perfect. Be careful." That was the moment something inside me began to shift. I couldn't ignore the doubt anymore. I asked Brandon to take a selfie right then in real time. He said he couldn't. I asked again the next day. Same excuse. Finally, I pressed harder. And after hours of back and forth, he gave in. He sent me a link to a Facebook profile under a different name. "That's me," he said. It wasn't. The name, the photos, the entire identity, none of it matched what he had told me. The person I had been talking to for months wasn't real. My stomach turned to ice. My fingers trembled. I felt betrayed, violated, and terrified all at once. I stopped replying, blocked his number, tried to erase him from my life, but he didn't let go. He started calling me, dozens of times a day. Then came the messages. At first he begged, pleaded, told me he was sorry, that he loved me, that he couldn't lose me. When that didn't work, he changed tactics. He threatened me. Said he had saved all the pictures I'd sent. Said he'd post them online, send them to my friends, to my family. Said he'd ruin me. I was 17. I didn't know what to do. I was ashamed of those pictures, ashamed of my body. The thought of anyone seeing them made me sick, so I gave in. I talked to him again, kept things light, kept him calm. I tried to wean him off slowly, give him just enough to stay quiet, but not enough to keep the fire burning. It worked for a while, until my birthday. It was a Monday. I kept it low-key, no party, no celebration, just me, a few texts from classmates, and a growing sense of dread. Because I knew he planned to visit. And on Friday, the text came. "I'm driving to your city," he said. "I'll pick you up from school." I panicked. He didn't know where I lived, not exactly, but he knew what school I went to. He knew enough. I didn't have many people I could turn to. My circle had shrunk that year for reasons too complicated to explain, but I reached out to one of the few people I still trusted, a guy friend I hadn't spoken to in months. I told him everything. He didn't judge me. He just listened, and then he said, "I'll follow you home. Make sure you're safe." That afternoon, I walked straight to my car, ignoring the flood of text lighting up my phone. "Where are you? I'm here. Come outside." I didn't respond. My friend trailed me all the way to my apartment, parked nearby, and stayed while I cried on my couch. I turned off my phone. For hours, the silence was all I needed. Later that night, when I turned it back on, the messages were there. Dozens. Angry, threatening, vile. He said he'd expose me. Said he'd show everyone who I really was. Said I was a liar, a tease, a blatch. I snapped. I sent him a barrage of texts, unfiltered, furious, raw. I told him I was done, that I wasn't scared anymore, that I didn't care if he posted anything. I told him he was pathetic, that no one would ever love someone who couldn't even show their real face, and then I blocked him again. A week passed, then a month. Slowly, he faded. He'd resurface once in a while, his name popping up on an Instagram request or a message sent from a new account. But I never replied. Never opened the door again. I'm 22 now, and I still think about him sometimes. I still wonder what he looked like, who he really was. I never found out, but I learned a lot about myself, about vulnerability, about fear, about what it means to have your trust turned into a weapon. He wasn't my first stalker. There was one before, back in 6th grade. But that's another story. One I'm not quite ready to tell. For now, this is the story I carry. The story of a man who wore a mask made of lies and charm, who pretended to love me just to collect pieces of my soul. A man who tried to break me with shame and fear, but didn't. So Brandon, whoever you are, wherever you are, let's never meet again. Story 4, the chess game I never escaped. A few years ago, I matched with a man on Tinder during my freshman year of college. I had just gotten out of a relationship and was in that post-breakup headspace where you're simultaneously aching for distraction and desperate for something that feels new. He was older than me, 24 to my 18, and there was something slightly odd about the way he messaged, but we shared a few interests. We both liked video games. We liked walking dogs. He mentioned that he also went to my university, and somehow I talked myself into thinking that it was fine. Maybe this would be just a nice, casual date. Nothing serious. We'll call him D. He told me he was out of town for his grandmother's funeral, but insisted that he would cut his visit short just to come pick me up. That meant driving 5 hours one way. I told him that wasn't necessary, that we could just reschedule, but he was insistent. It wasn't romantic, it was strange. I should have known then, but I didn't want to be rude, and part of me was flattered by the effort, so I agreed. When he showed up, he wasn't dressed like someone who'd just come from a funeral. He was wearing sweatpants, a stained white tank top, and flip-flops. I remember blinking at him in confusion, thinking maybe he changed after the service, but something didn't sit right. Still, I climbed into the passenger's seat and told myself not to judge. The plan was to grab food and hang out, a short, simple first date. Instead, he asked if we could stop and pick up his dog first. He said he'd left it with a friend. I didn't mind, I loved dogs, But when we pulled into the apartment complex, he told me to stay in the car and disappeared inside. When he returned, the dog, a golden retriever, was with him, and it immediately began growling at me, not just a little bark, a deep, guttural, almost threatening growl. I shrank into my seat. It was the first time in my life a dog had ever reacted to me like that. I remember thinking, dogs know. They always know. With the dog now in the back seat, Dee said he needed to stop at his place to drop the dog off. Again, logical enough. I didn't argue, but when we arrived at his house, I felt my stomach twist. The outside looked fine, nothing remarkable, but inside it was a disaster. Garbage bags lined the entryway, trash on the couch, the smell of unwashed laundry and something stale and chemical hung in the air. He casually mentioned that his roommate wasn't home. He didn't seem ashamed of the mess, just brushed some empty wrappers off the couch and gestured for me to sit. I didn't want to sit. Every cell in my body screamed for me to run. But I was already inside, and I was still trying to be polite. He brought out a chessboard, saying he remembered that I had mentioned wanting to learn. I smiled awkwardly, trying to stay friendly. He explained the game, in excruciating detail, not just casually, intensely. He talked about every piece like it was sacred. And then he started quizzing me. What's this one called? What move does this make? I got the answers wrong, and with each mistake he became more agitated. His tone sharpened, his voice rose. He began snapping at me, correcting me loudly, slapping the table and telling me to focus. I laughed nervously, trying to change the subject. Maybe we could take a break, I suggested. Do something else? He agreed. But then he led me to his bedroom. I followed, hoping maybe it would be better. Maybe he'd put on a movie and the tension would ease. Instead, he said he needed to put sheets on the bed because he'd just washed them before the funeral. But when we got to his room, it was just as messy as the rest of the house. Dirty laundry in piles. No TV, no decorations, just a mattress on the floor and a phone in his hand. He pulled up Iron Man 2 on his tiny screen and said we'd watch it like that. We watched about 10 minutes. Then, things got physical. I won't go into the details. I'll just say it didn't go as far as it could have. He didn't force anything, not physically, but the pressure was there. I tried to pull back gently, telling him I wasn't in the mood, that I wanted to wait. At first, he acted like he understood. Then he began asking questions. Why didn't I want him? What had changed? Was something wrong with him? I tried to placate him. I said it wasn't him, that I just didn't feel like it tonight. He seemed to calm down, and we went back to the living room. But the calm didn't last. He started ranting about his life, about how no one liked him, how every girl he dated used him for one-night stands, how he didn't understand what was wrong with him. And then, out of nowhere, he started crying, telling me stories about his mother, about how she had hurt him, about how she never loved him, about the things she said to him that scarred him. I sat there, stunned, terrified, but still pretending, still acting like I was interested, like I cared, because I didn't know what else to do. Then he stood up and walked to the kitchen, asked if I wanted a drink. I declined. He insisted. I declined again. He asked if I'd at least have some water. Again I said no. My instincts were screaming now. Don't drink anything. Don't eat anything. Don't stay. But I didn't know how to leave. I tried downloading Uber behind his back, but the app asked for my card information and I couldn't enter it fast enough without him noticing. I felt trapped. So I waited, played along, smiled, nodded, faked yawns, and said I should probably get back, that my roommate would worry. To my relief, he didn't argue. He looked at the clock and muttered, "Yeah, I guess it's late." I told him maybe we could get breakfast tomorrow on campus. He lit up at that, seemed to believe me, walked me to the car and drove me back to my dorm in silence. The kind of silence that feels like it could snap if you say the wrong thing. When he parked, he offered to walk me to the door. I refused, gently but firmly. "I don't want to bother you," I said. "I'll see you tomorrow." I walked around the corner of the building, then ran. sprinting up the stairs, heart racing, not stopping until I was inside and the door was locked behind me. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping, every muscle in my body tense. I had never been more relieved to be alone. Over the next few days, he messaged me again and again, begged to see me, said he'd pay me just to sit next to him in the library. I declined, always politely. I saw him once more after that, at the campus gym. He didn't see me. I turned and walked the other way. Sometimes I still wonder how many girls had dates like mine with him, how many stayed longer, how many didn't make it out so easily. It still sends chills down my spine when I think about the way his face changed when I said no, the way his emotions switched so fast, the rage, the sadness, the desperation. It was all too much, like he wasn't really one person, but 100 unstable ones fighting for control. So D, wherever you are now, let's never meet again. Story 5. Flowers, frappuccinos, and a fast exit. When I was 19, I worked at a coffee shop just a few blocks from campus. It wasn't glamorous. Early mornings, stained aprons, and endless orders of caramel macchiatos. But it paid the bills, and I liked the rhythm of it. The routine grounded me. Every day was a collage of familiar sounds. The hiss of steamed milk, the clink of cups, and the low murmur of early commuters mumbling into their first caffeine hit. Most customers kept their heads down, tapping at their phones, focused on their lives. But then there was Dave. Dave wasn't like the others. He was persistent. He ordered a strawberry and cream frappuccino the first time I met him, and while I blended it behind the counter, he made small talk. Light, flirty, not uncomfortable, just unexpected. He asked for my number and I declined, politely but firmly. I didn't give my number to customers. It was a simple rule I made for myself. A safety net. He came back 20 minutes later, ordered the exact same drink. I didn't really want another frappuccino, he said with a smile. I just wanted to talk to you again. I'll admit, I thought it was kind of sweet. There was something boyish about his awkwardness. He didn't come off as aggressive or entitled, just determined. So I gave him my number. We started texting that night. The conversation was easy. He didn't waste time with long intros. He dove right into asking me out for dinner. I said yes. The date was set for the following evening. Before we even went out, he asked if I'd come visit him at work. He managed a local video rental store, one of the few left in town. Out of curiosity more than anything else, I stopped by. He met me at the front door, and we took a short walk. That's when he dropped the first red flag. So this is just going to be a fling, right? I blinked. Not exactly romantic. I was insulted, not just by the assumption, but by the lack of tact. He tried to recover, laughed it off, changed the subject. I should have cancelled right then, but I didn't. Part of me chalked it up to nerves. Maybe he didn't mean it the way it sounded. Maybe he was just awkward with words. So the date stayed on. That night, I drove to his house. Looking back, I realized how careless that was. Meeting someone for the first time in their home, especially when you've only spoken for a day, is never wise. But I was 19 and trying to see the best in people. When I arrived, he greeted me with a bouquet of flowers. That threw me. It felt like a contradiction. The guy who asked if this was just a fling was now standing there grinning with a fresh bouquet, like we were in a rom-com. He cooked dinner. I don't remember much about the food, something simple, but I remember his roommate Joe. Joe was older, quieter, and surprisingly friendly. We all played some drinking games together. Joe made the evening feel lighter, less awkward. He laughed at my jokes, told me stories, and made me feel like I wasn't the only normal person in the room. But then Dave snapped. Mid-conversation, out of nowhere, he barked at Joe. "Why don't you just take her out if you like her so much?" His tone was sharp, accusatory. Joe froze. I froze. It was a sudden shift. Like a curtain being ripped away. Just hours into knowing me, Dave was jealous, territorial, and visibly angry that I was getting along with someone else in his house. The room went quiet. Joe made an excuse to leave. I begged him silently with my eyes to stay, but he gave me an apologetic smile and slipped out the door. And just like that, I was alone with Dave. The air felt different after that. He tried to act like nothing had happened, but the edge in his voice lingered. The charm had cracked, the jokes faded, and then came the story. He started talking about his family, specifically his parents, and more specifically, the time his father tried to kill his mother with a shotgun. It wasn't framed as a confession. It wasn't told with any clear emotion. He just said it, like it was a piece of trivia, something to fill the silence. I didn't know how to respond. My skin crawled, but I didn't want to set him off, so I nodded, listened, waited. Then my phone rang. It was my younger brother. He was 17 at the time and he needed a ride home from a party. I could have cried with relief. I told Dave I had to go pick him up and he insisted on coming along. I didn't want him to. I didn't want to be near him, but saying no felt dangerous. So I let him. When we arrived, he got out and started mingling at the party. I stood off to the side with my brother, waiting for him to finish his goodbyes. As we were walking back to the car, my brother told me something that made my blood run cold. I bumped into Dave inside, he said, and he told me that I ruined his night, that if I touched him again, he'd break my arm. I stared at him, horrified. I still had to drive this man home. The car ride back was quiet, tense. He didn't bring up what he said to my brother, and I didn't ask. When we pulled up to his apartment, he asked if I wanted to come inside. I declined, firmly. He asked again. I declined again. Finally, he got out and I drove away as fast as I could. The next day I got a text from him. Not a good sign when the flowers are left behind. I responded, cold and clear. Not a good sign when you threaten my brother and accuse him of ruining your night. He tried to walk it back, said it was a joke, that my brother misunderstood him, that he was just drunk and joking around. But I didn't believe him, not after everything else. The jealousy, the shotgun story, the entitlement, the mood swings. It was all too much. I told him to leave me alone. I told him to never contact me again. He didn't take it well. I blocked him. Looking back, I realized how lucky I was. He didn't hurt me, but the potential was there. I think about what would have happened if I had gone back inside with him that night. If my brother hadn't called. If Joe hadn't been there at the beginning of the evening. There were so many variables that kept things from going worse. Dave was the kind of person who hides behind forced politeness and performative charm, who pretends to be sweet flowers and smiles and strawberry frappuccinos, but beneath the surface is something unstable, something simmering, the kind of person who doesn't need a weapon to make you feel unsafe. Just a look, a tone, a threat slipped casually between sentences. I've told this story a few times, mostly to younger women, as a warning, a reminder that even the dates that start with flowers can end with a knot in your stomach, that someone bringing you roses doesn't mean they have good intentions. Sometimes they're just covering the thorns. So Dave, wherever you are now, let's never meet again. Story 6. Brad, the stranger who wanted to kill me. I was around 20 when I met Brad. His name wasn't particularly memorable, nor was his face. I remember it more as a blur, like static on a television screen you try not to look at too long. We met on Tinder, which by then had become a staple of modern dating. I was young, open, and figuring out who I was. At first glance, Brad seemed like the kind of guy I'd normally avoid. He was forward, borderline arrogant, but I thought maybe that confidence was masking something softer underneath, something honest. I was wrong. Our conversation didn't last long before I realized we were incompatible. He was aggressive, rude, and quick to mock my opinions. I made it clear that I wasn't interested. Politely at first, then firmly, then outright. That should have been the end of it, but Brad didn't like being told no. That's when the messages turned dark. Within hours of me blocking him on Tinder, he had found me on Facebook. He sent me a long, violent message detailing exactly what he would do to me. At first, I thought it was some grotesque joke, something to shake me up and rattle me before disappearing. But as I kept reading, My skin began to crawl. He said he would stalk me, find me, and break into my house. I heard he wanted to assault me, to kidnap me, to kill me. He described how he would gouge out my eyes and watch the life leave them. There were no emojis, no laughs, just cold, clinical sentences that didn't read like a fantasy, they read like a plan. He mentioned strangling me, said it was what he thought about often, that the idea of watching me die at his hands gave him satisfaction. I remember sitting there, shaking, not just because of what he said, but because of how calmly he said it, as if he wasn't angry, just certain, like it was inevitable. Then came the final blow. He mentioned my home address. He didn't just guess, he named the street, the city, even the house number. I had recently moved in with my dad after leaving college, and Brad lived nearly 3 hours away. I had never told him anything personal, never given him any clues, yet here he was, speaking my address back to me, like a threat soaked in ice. A small part of me, the part clinging to logic, thought maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he Googled me and got lucky, but another part of me knew better. He had gone looking for me, deliberately, and he found me. I called the police. My voice trembled as I read the messages to the dispatcher. When they arrived, I handed over the screenshots. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic, but careful with his words. He told me it qualified as a terroristic threat, but unless Brad showed up in person, there wasn't much they could do. They took down his name, his online profiles, even his place of work, information Brad had helpfully posted in his own dating bio. That night, I locked every window, double-checked every door, slept with the lights on. I kept my phone at my side like a weapon. Nothing happened. Days passed, then a week. Then I got an idea. Brad was reckless enough to use his real name online, his real workplace, his real connections. So I found his Facebook page, scrolled through it, studied every picture, and then I started messaging people. His co-workers, his friends, his family. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for insurance, for a paper trail, something that would make him think twice the next time he considered threatening a stranger. I sent every screenshot, every chilling message, along with a summary of what he had done. Most didn't respond, but one did. His mother. She messaged me late at night. Her words were frantic, full of apologies and disbelief. She said they were driving across state lines to confront him, begged me not to tell him in advance, promised she would handle it. I never knew what happened in that confrontation, whether she really followed through or whether Brad even acknowledged it. But for a while, the messages stopped. Then, a few years later, I remembered him again. Something had triggered the memory, a show maybe or a story online, and I decided to do one last thing. One final warning. I posted it all on Facebook, his face, his messages, his threats. I included the name of the company he worked for, the one still listed on his profile. I didn't ask for justice, just awareness. I wanted other women in the area to be careful, to know his name, to know his face. The post exploded. It was shared over 3,000 times in 2 days. The floodgates opened. Messages poured in, strangers thanking me, women telling me their own stories, a few who even recognized him. Some said he had messaged them too, others just offered support. Then something unexpected happened. Women who worked at his company started messaging me. They had seen the post. They were horrified. Some had never spoken to him. Others had felt uncomfortable around him but never knew why. One woman in particular told me the rest of the story. After my post went viral, the company received hundreds of messages. Their social media was overwhelmed. HR was contacted directly. Within 48 hours, Brad was called into a meeting, not just with his manager, with HR and the CEO of the entire company. Apparently, the CEO was a woman, and she did not take the situation lightly. He was fired, escorted off the premises by security. The woman who messaged me said there was no debate, no grey area. The company acted swiftly and decisively. Brad, who had worked there for years and likely thought he was untouchable, lost everything. No reference, no severance, just silence. After that, I never heard from him again. Not directly, but one last message did make its way to me. This time from his grandmother. She told me I was a liar, that what I was doing was illegal, that I was ruining his life. I didn't respond. I still have the screenshots. I still have the original messages, not because I want to relive them, but because it reminds me how important it is to document things, how even the quietest threat can grow loud if you shine enough light on it, how people like Brad rely on our silence. It taught me that monsters don't always come in masks. Sometimes they come in sweatshirts and sneakers. Sometimes they work at video stores. Sometimes they go to your school. Sometimes they look like anyone. But their power is always the same. Fear. Intimidation. That's why I shared the story, why I'm still sharing it, because silence protects no one. So Brad, wherever you are now, let's never meet again. Story 7. The Man Who Wanted to Own Me. When I was 22, I started seeing someone who, at first, seemed like a kind, slightly quirky guy. His name was Mark, and he was the sort of man who came off as overly eager, but I'd been through so many indifferent, aloof guys that the enthusiasm was actually refreshing. He laughed too loud, texted too often, and made plans faster than I could keep up with. But part of me was flattered. After years of chasing unavailable men, being pursued for a change felt novel, even safe. Mark wasn't physically my type, tall but hunched with a nervous twitch and slightly wild eyes, but he was attentive. He remembered my favourite drinks, offered to drive me to appointments, and texted me every morning like it was a ritual. He said he believed in treating a woman like a queen, and I'd never been treated like royalty before. At first I thought I could love him, or at least grow into it. We went on walks through the park and spent nights watching documentaries about animal psychology. He was obsessed with wolves, said he felt a deep spiritual connection to them. That should have been a red flag, but again, I was 22. I thought it made him deep. Things changed quickly. In the beginning, his clinginess was framed as affection. He'd call it being in sync. He would show up at my apartment with takeout without asking first. He started leaving little things at my place, a toothbrush, a phone charger, a t-shirt, and said it was to make it easier when he stayed over. At first I didn't mind, but then he started coming over unannounced. Not just once, frequently. I'd step out of the shower and hear a knock, or worse, see his silhouette through the window, because he had already let himself in with the spare key I had stupidly given him. When I tried to set boundaries, he acted wounded, said things like, "I thought we were serious," or "You must not love me as much as I love you." He had a way of turning every conversation into a test. If I needed space, it meant I was pulling away. If I didn't reply to a text quickly, he assumed I was cheating. He started going through my phone, casually at first, then constantly, always under the excuse of, if you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't care. Then came the notebook. One afternoon, I was folding laundry while Mark was in the shower. I accidentally knocked over his backpack and saw a thick, black, leather-bound notebook spill out. Curious, I picked it up. Inside, the pages were filled with meticulous handwriting, lists, charts, observations, about me. Not just sweet things like, she loves vanilla chai lattes, or her favourite movie is Spirited Away. Oh, these were tactical, detailed accounts of everything I did. 7:45, AMLAM to leaves for work, blue sweater, ponytail. 12:13 p.m, texts roommate, laughing emoji. 6:32 p.m, back home, tired, no appetite. He had mapped out my routine like I was a science experiment. The pages were dated, cross-referenced, annotated. I flipped through entry after entry until the air in the room seemed to shrink. My ears rang. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I dropped the notebook as he walked back in. He saw it, and something in his expression twisted. "You weren't supposed to look at that," he said quietly. I asked him what it was. He said it was love. He said it was how wolves tracked their mates. That's when I knew I had to leave. I tried to break up with him that night, sat him down on the couch and explained calmly that I needed time and space, that it wasn't working, that I didn't feel safe. He didn't take it well. He cried. At first, quiet tears, then came the shaking, the sobbing, the begging. He knelt on the floor, clutched my legs, and said he would die without me, that I was his moon, his mate, his reason. I stayed calm. I told him we'd talk later, that he needed to go home. He agreed, reluctantly. But he left with his key. That night I put a chair against the door, and for the next 3 weeks I tried to disappear. I blocked him, changed my routines, took different routes to work. I told my friends, told my boss. I asked my landlord to change the locks, and I slept with a baseball bat beside my bed. But he found ways in. He started leaving notes on my car, slipping them under the windshield like flyers. Some were apologies, others were poems. Long rambling verses about wolves and stars and soulmates. He texted my friends, showed up outside my job. My co-workers had to walk me out every evening. I told him to leave me alone. I told him I'd call the police. I told him I wasn't scared to get a restraining order. And still, he waited, outside my window, in his car, sometimes just sitting there, watching. One night, I came home to find a gift bag on my doorstep. Inside was a necklace, a silver pendant shaped like a wolf's tooth, and a note, just one line, written in all caps, "Mine." That was the night I called the police. They couldn't do much. He hadn't technically trespassed. The bag wasn't threatening, just unwanted contact. They gave me a number to file a restraining order. Told me to keep documenting everything. I did. I logged every message, every appearance, every gift. Eventually it faded. I don't know why. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he found someone else. Maybe my silence finally sank in. But the visits stopped. The messages slowed. After months of terror, I finally had a few days of peace. Then a week. Then a month. I moved shortly after, changed my number, got a dog, and still, sometimes, I check the windows before I go to sleep. I look for headlights in the driveway, for shadows on the porch. Because men like Mark don't break in like burglars. They slide in like fog, soft, subtle, unnoticed, until you realize they've wrapped around your entire life. He never hit me, never raised his voice, but he tried to own me. That kind of control is its own kind of violence, the kind that doesn't leave bruises, just fear, deep, persistent fear that lives in your stomach like rot. So Mark, wherever you are now, let's never meet again. Story 8. The Girl in Apartment 3B. I had just moved into my first apartment when it started. It was a modest one-bedroom tucked inside a quiet, aging building on the edge of town. The kind of place where the paint peeled just slightly near the baseboards, and the hallways always smelled faintly of dust and old coffee. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had a space of my own, a front door that I locked with my own key, and a tiny kitchen where I could cook my late-night cravings without anyone judging me. There was freedom in that solitude. Freedom and a subtle kind of peace. The building was mostly quiet. A lot of older tenants, retirees who barely spoke above a whisper and rarely opened their blinds. There was one younger couple across the hall, always laughing, always leaving at odd hours in matching scrubs. I assumed they were nurses. Then there was the girl in apartment 3B. I first saw her on a rainy Thursday evening. I was carrying groceries through the lobby, fumbling with my umbrella, when the elevator doors opened and she stepped out. She was tall and slight, with dark, shoulder-length hair that curled at the tips like old film reels. Her eyes were downcast, hidden by long lashes, and she didn't speak, She didn't need to. Something about her presence filled the room with static. She walked past me without a word, her black hoodie soaked from the rain, her footsteps silent even on the tile floor. I assumed she was shy, maybe new, like me. I didn't think much of it at first, but over the next few weeks, I started seeing her everywhere. In the laundry room, in the stairwell, by the mailboxes. Always alone, always quiet, and always staring. At first it was just glances, brief, almost imperceptible, but then they lingered. I'd feel her eyes on me from across the parking lot. I'd catch her watching me from the third-floor hallway window as I took the trash out at night. She never smiled, never waved, just stood there, completely still, like a painting that had been hung slightly off-center. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just the weirdness of living alone for the first time, my brain filling in gaps with anxiety. But then came the noise. It started one night at around 2 a.m., a slow, rhythmic knock on my front door. Not frantic, not loud, just steady, like someone gently tapping a single knuckle against the wood every 5 seconds. I froze. Laid still in bed, my breath caught in my throat. The knocking continued for over 5 minutes, then it stopped. But I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I opened the door slowly, half expecting to see a note or a sign of who had been there. But there was nothing. No footprints, no damage, just silence. The next night it happened again, and the night after that, always at 2 a.m., always the same knock. I set up my phone to record, propped it on a stack of books aimed at the door. The video showed nothing but darkness and silence. No knocking, no figure, just me asleep on the couch, twitching at every imagined sound. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. Not that I really knew how to use it, but it felt like a shield, something between me and the unknown. I told my landlord. He shrugged, said it was probably the pipes, or the walls settling. He had a way of dismissing everything with a wave of his hand, like he'd seen too much in this building to care. Then, one evening, I bumped into the couple from across the hall. We were both picking up packages in the lobby, and I figured I'd finally bring it up. "Hey," I said casually, "do you guys know the girl in 3B? The woman's face changed immediately. She stopped smiling. Her boyfriend stiffened. "She's weird," the woman said after a pause. "I'd steer clear." I laughed awkwardly, unsure if she was joking. "Has she ever, watched you from the windows?" Now her expression turned serious. "She's not well," she said. "She moved in a few months before you, barely speaks. We hear her talking to herself at night." The guy nodded. "Sometimes screaming, sometimes crying, but when you check on her, it stops, like she knows you're there." I swallowed. The hallway suddenly felt colder. "Has she ever knocked on your door?" They exchanged a glance, shook their heads. "Just yours?" the woman asked. I didn't answer. That night, I locked every door and window. I slid the coffee table against the front door for extra measure. I kept the lights on, and for a while, there was nothing. Until I went to the laundry room the next afternoon. I had left my clothes unattended for 20 minutes. When I came back, my clean laundry had been removed from the dryer and stacked neatly on the folding table. Too neatly. Every item was perfectly folded, sorted, even my socks, paired and aligned. On top of the stack, a single black thread curled like a spider's leg. I knew I didn't own anything black. I started using the laundromat down the street after that. A week later, I was coming home late. It was just after midnight, and I had been at a friend's apartment watching movies. I took the elevator up, half asleep, half wishing I had stayed the night there. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw her, the girl from 3B, standing outside my door, not knocking, just standing, still as stone. She didn't look at me, just turned slowly and walked back down the hall to her unit. She didn't unlock the door, just opened it and vanished inside. I waited until I heard the latch click before approaching my door. No note, no flowers, no signs, but the smell. That faint, almost sweet, metallic smell. I knew it from somewhere. It clung to my doorknob. I wiped it with my sleeve and went inside. That was the last straw. I filed a report with the building, called the police. They told me they couldn't do anything unless she physically harmed me, unless there was a threat, a weapon, something tangible. Watching wasn't a crime. Knocking wasn't a crime. Being unsettling wasn't a crime. So I did what I had to do. I moved, found a sublet on the other side of the city and broke my lease. Left behind the furniture I couldn't carry and the plants that had grown used to the sunlight on that narrow windowsill. I didn't tell the landlord why. I didn't leave a forwarding address. Months passed. I started sleeping again, started smiling again. I met new neighbors, ones who nodded kindly but kept their distance. No notes, no knocks, no girls in black hoodies standing outside my door. Then one morning, I went to check the mailbox at my new place. Tucked between two pieces of junk mail was a folded piece of paper, plain white, no stamp, no address, just a single word, written in block letters. Watching. I never found out how she found me, but sometimes I still wake up at 2 a.m. and listen and wonder and pray there's no knock. So to the girl in apartment 3B, whoever you are, whatever you are, let's never meet again.